Like many of you, I'm proud to be an American, but most importantly, I'm proud to be a father and husband, which means it's my duty to protect my family no matter what circumstances are thrown my way, which is why I rely on my Patriot Supply. This month, their mega 3-month emergency food kit comes jam-packed with 33 varieties of filling and delicious foods. Not only does that include creamy chicken flavored rice, old-fashioned Italian spaghetti, and savory, cheesy broccoli soup, but you will also get a bonus protein kit with diced beef, flavorful chicken chunks, and 3 varieties of beans, plus 9 different fruits, vegetables, and snacks. All in all, this emergency food kit provides a whopping 2,500 calories per day and keeps you well fed and ready for anything. The way I see it, it's my solemn duty as an American and father and husband to protect my family without waiting for handouts. And that starts with food you can depend on that lasts up to 25 years. If you go to preparewitheddy.com right now, you can save up to $300 on your mega 3-month emergency food kit. It ships fast and free. Once again, that's preparewitheddy.com and save up to $300 on your mega emergency food kit supply. Thank you and God bless.
Welcome to Shoot Me Straight, Dave Fields, Eddie Gallagher. Today we have Nathan Nelson, which I've only seen a little bit of your story from the website.
Okay.
But I'm super excited to hear it. I know just tad little bits, but like usual, we're like, don't tell me very much. We want to hear it first time.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited to hear it. Your background, where'd you grow up? Let's start there.
So I grew up in rural Mississippi, so northwest Mississippi, very close to Oxford. Very small community, but it was nice.
Okay.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
How long were you there?
I was there until my late teens. So I graduated high school there, did a very brief stint at Ole Miss and had an incredible time, but needed to take some time off to actually establish goals and decide what I wanted to do instead of socialize. So I took some time off after that and just kind of moved around working in restaurants and sowing the old wild oats, as they say.
Yep.
It actually took me to the time I was 22 and was bartending down in Miami. I decided to completely get out of the southeast, and because even though Miami's further southeast, it's really not, completely different environment. So I was bartending down there and just kind of got to a point in my life where I said, okay, I can't do this for the rest of my life. I got to finish my education. I was really honest with myself, like, hey, man, I need some real boundaries. I need somebody else to establish those because I'm not doing that very well.
Mm-hmm. Was there a defining point that got you to that decision? Like, hey, this isn't going well for me, or I need to do something different.
It was kind of a positive thing, honestly. The owner of the restaurant that I was working at wanted to expand and open a second location down in South Beach, and he had just fired his GM. So he approached me and said, hey, I want you to help me establish this new restaurant and then come be the GM of this one. And I didn't agree with the owner as to why he let the previous GM go. I would have made the same decision. So it made me recognize that I've got no job security, no health insurance. I'm going to fundamentally cap out at probably $50,000 a year in this line of work. If I stay with this, this is going to be, and that is not how I envisioned my lot in life, being, working that restaurant life.
Being stuck somewhere like that, yeah.
It's not really stable either.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like it was, there's always a lot of drama with the personnel and transient types of, it's all kinds of chaos. It can be a lot of fun when you're
the restaurant industry is a blast. I mean, I worked in it before I joined. Yeah. And my daughter worked at Blue Man, she worked at a restaurant industry around here, and I told her, I was like, it's one of the funnest jobs because the people there are they're partying and they're working to party.
Right.
That's pretty much it. But I was like, what comes with that is all sorts of drama that you never thought you would have to deal with in your life or see. I was like, and it's not, and I was the same way. I'm like, you don't want to make that your career path. You know, just do it for now and then move on.
Yeah, so I don't know, man. I say that it was a divine revelation for me that really opened my eyes. And I'd never thought about joining the military, ever. Wasn't on my radar, zero desire to do that. But yeah, the Air Force just kind of popped into my head. And so I called a recruiter in Miami, and they came up and gave me a little practice ASVAB and, you know, kind of brought me in. And the Army recruiter called me and offered me a massive bonus to join the Army. And I was like, and I called my dad up and I told him about it. He's like, Nate, there's a reason I got for that much money.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want that, man. I'm glad you chose the Air Force. I just got really fortunate. I feel I got really fortunate with that because I came in with no understanding as to what I wanted to do there. Fundamentally, I was there for education and, like I said, the discipline, the little adventure of traveling, some, you know, maybe some new skill sets. But, you know, in my head, I thought, hey, I'm going to do 4 years and then I'll be able to go to school and I'll have a plan by then. So I told the recruiter, and this is, you know, you'll laugh at this recruiter story. I told him, I said, you know, I kind of feel like I want to do something where I'll feel like I'm contributing, but just find something that you think I'd be good for, and we'll just go with that as far as a job goes. And so he put me in intel analysis, and didn't know anything about it until I went through basic training and went to school. And what I found was, hey man, this is something that I really enjoy, and I'm kind of excited about this. I enjoy the process, and I can see a path to make a career out of this. It was really incredible. So
With intel analysis, do you just, is it, you get, okay, there's a possible target here, or we're trying to find, or you get information in and then you do, is there like statistical stuff that you run against it? I mean, is there like, I imagine there's a lot of method.
it's super multifaceted. So
Okay.
you have
Human, SIGINT.
you have your different sources of collection. So you have the collection piece. Then you've got processing and exploitation, which you could imagine like imagery or something, and then you refine it. You look at what it is an intel imagery analyst is going to look at this image and identify what is on the image. And then the dissemination piece is, how do we package this up into a usable product to give it to decision makers or the operators that are going to be using this to action the target.
Oh, gotcha.
So there's and every single assignment that you go to, it can be drastically different. Drastically different. So that's one of the things that I really enjoy. So what I did was, as soon as I finished, so obviously I enlisted first, but decided I was going to pursue a path for commissioning. So I finished a degree in 4 years, you know, deployed, and the day I was about to get on a C-17, leaving Kandahar in 2009, my commander called me back from St. Louis and told me that I got picked up to go to OTS. So I was really, really excited about that. So
That's the officer selection program.
yeah, officer training school.
Officer training school. That's
for
what
the
they
Air
call it in the
Force.
Air Force.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, OCS, you know,
Yeah.
OTS, yeah. So yeah, that was where I was heading, and that was I was really excited about it. So I always kind of look back and feel like I kind of fumbled my way through a little bit, and I just kind of felt like, you know, the path was laid out without my knowledge. You know?
How was OTS compared to like boot camp?
It was a breeze. So The OTS, the way it was structured when I went through was 12 weeks. In the first 6 weeks, you're an underclass, and the previous class is like a instructor class. So they kind of do the drill instructor type, song and dance or whatever, yell at you
Yeah.
and line you up and PT you and all that stuff. But, compared to a legitimate tech sergeant at Lackland, it's not the same. So, and obviously having gone through that before, it was everything was expected. I
You knew the game.
I knew the game, but also, with OTS, you have very few people are prior enlisted there. It was definitely a minority. During that class, they were pulling in a tremendous amount of engineers and pilots. So you have people who went to civilian college and pilot training and want to come into the Air Force. So they go through that process, and this is their first introduction. You've got engineers that are, looking to come in, and this is their first experience with that. So there was like I said, small minority, and so we were all recognized, and they knew that they didn't have to, go through the detailed process to ensure that we
they don't have to
maintain
indoctrinate
standards.
you. It's you're already indoctrinated. You're like, hey, I know the game, I know the system. But
Exactly.
the kids from college, obviously, who have no military background, they need to learn how the military works, the customs, like all the stuff that you already knew, and then also how to be a leader. It's like you're going to be in charge. So, which is why I imagine like they have the upperclassmen instructing you, because that's part of their leadership training as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
They need a friggin' cheat sheet on all the acronyms. Good
Yeah.
Lord.
My wife does that too. Sometimes I like to intentionally throw out way more than I need just to keep her confused. I make up new ones as I go. Hilarious. So, I went through OTS, and I had initially got picked up to fly after that, but I had such a problem with the flight physical, the hearing portion of that they wouldn't even let me sit in the back of an aircraft. So I went back through Intel school again, back at Goodfellow in West Texas, and so I got 2 rounds of Intel school, which was fantastic. And then I got at the end of Intel school, I was informed that I was going to be assigned to an AFSOC unit. Came down here to Hurlburt Field and learned about the special tactics community and AFSOC mission as a whole, which was fantastic. So when I was enlisted, my first duty station was at Air Mobility Command. The Air Mobility Command handles the C-17s and the refuelers and C-5s and all these big transport aircraft. So to say those 2 missions are almost opposite each other is kind of an understatement, but that's what I liked so much about Intel, is that you could go from, apply the skill sets that you have to this mission, and then go, do Intel for ground operations over here. And special tactics is great because you kind of merge air and ground operations together. Those combat controllers are fundamentally, when we were in Iraq and Afghanistan, fulfilling that JTAC role.
So you get assigned to the special force unit, like you are attached to the unit. Is that the right way to say it?
Yeah, so I served as the director of Intel for that special tactics squadron at Joint Base Lewis McChord.
Okay.
So typically that was a captain's role, and but they kind of let me come in as a second lieutenant because of my prior enlisted time, and they said, he's not so fresh that, but I tried to go in with an open mind and full enthusiasm, and and I was kind of warned, like, hey man, this is a different kind of community. This is not the same. You're going to have to run with them and lift with them, and in order to really kind of be accepted and appreciated.
Yeah, you gotta earn your way to be accepted in those type of special operations communities, because, as you know, you show up and you're an outsider. It's like you're not getting a warm welcome.
Right.
It's like, who are you? Why are you here? Can we trust you?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost night and day from Air Mobility Command. You can imagine, I'm in my mid-20s at my first duty station, and it was really not difficult to physically outperform everyone else in my squadron, right? So it's just like, hey, if you're at the top, you don't really have to push very hard. But when you're in a giant group of super performers, it's a completely different type of environment. So I'm working real hard to try to stay in the middle of everybody, which I loved it. I love that challenge and the push, and it really fueled me. So one thing that it definitely did was made me want to, really maximize my role as much as I possibly could. I want to come away from this assignment having left nothing on the table and just doing the coolest thing that I could possibly do. And I was excited that I got opportunities for that. Yeah.
And so was that actually a deployment? Did you go with those guys to Afghanistan or Iraq?
Yeah, so 2012, my wife and I moved up to Tacoma, and we'd been married 4 years at this point, and really excited about it. We got there and we were gonna buy our first house, and we were just really at an exciting place in our lives. And we arrived on station, and the whole squadron was already deployed. So they told me, hey, drop your bags. We're going to go ahead and send you over there so you catch the last half of it and really understand what we do. So it was obviously kind of a shock for my wife. It's like, hey, welcome to Tacoma. Figure this out on your own because I got to go. And but she did really well. My wife is fantastic and very competent, and was capable of not only finding us a great house and the right house for us, but going through everything that we needed to do to purchase it and get us settled in and integrated and everything while I was over there. So I did a brief time in 2012 at Bagram, where I just kind of learned about the stock operations and how all that runs, and understanding how our combat controllers are dispersed and how the intel operations run there. And then we came back and immediately went into some training. We did some pre-deployment training for the follow-on year, because the different special tactics squadrons were just in constant rotation in and out of Afghanistan. So we knew it was coming. We knew the 13 deployment was coming. It wasn't a surprise. That spring, in April, we found out that we were pregnant for the first time. So I was super excited. I was a little scared, but just fatherhood, I'm like, so right before we left on the 13 deployment, I found out I was having a little girl, which made me even more scared. I had a good understanding of how to raise boys. You just kind of whoop them and spray them off with a hose until they're 18 and kick them out the door, right? But little
Girls
girls
a whole different ballgame.
precious and fragile, and Daddy could probably say something wrong and mess them up for life, and you don't want to do that. But I read all the books while I was on that 13 deployment, so I felt pretty confident by the time as I was preparing to come back. But that final deployment was a bit different, as I was telling you before. We started recording. My role in that deployment was much more active and hands-on with each of the ODAs. So,
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah, go
I just
ahead.
want to rewind just a little bit. So you said you do the workup, right? When you came back getting ready for that 2013 deployment.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like for you guys, like the workup, and how do you guys prepare as combat controllers to obviously eventually get disseminated to ODA, SEAL teams, this and that? Like, because I've had them attached to us, great dudes, very smart and intelligent, and I just don't know too much about what their workup looks like or how they prepare to deploy.
yeah, absolutely. So, one thing is going to be just kind of that holistic rehabilitation from the previous deployment. Where are you resiliency-wise, psychologically and physically and all of that stuff? Is there any injuries that need to be worked out? Is there any financial or home life things that you need to shore up?
So that's a big focus?
Oh,
Wow.
I mean, it's all part of it, and it's all stuff that they talk about there. And there's always individuals that are there to kind of help through those things, a psych doc or a physical therapist, or and they
That's not what your workups look
The
like.
Air Force does it right, man.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's...
Yeah, so they kind of look through, and the way they present it is like a stoplight chart in the same way they do for aircraft. You're either red, yellow, or green,
Yeah.
right? And we've got to treat our personnel at least as good as our equipment, right? And so if you're broke,
It's supposed to be better.
yeah, it's supposed to be, right? And so if you're broke in some kind of way, like we want you full up so that you can go get after the mission again and not have a much more serious thing going on. But I mean, you understand like the mentality. Sometimes you don't want to admit some things that are wrong
Yeah, well, that's where, I mean...
because there's concerns that, hey, they're gonna take me off, right?
Yep.
And I need to go. Or it's going to mess up my clearance, and I'm never going to get that back, and that's super valuable, or something else, right? I feel like I'm going to let somebody else down if I don't.
Yeah, there's all that internal pressure that we all put on ourselves. It's
Sure.
like, yeah, I want to be with the boys. I'm going.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what's going on in my life. And they try to do that, the red, yellow, green. I think it was at SEAL Team 7 one time, and I remember taking the questionnaire, and I was like, dude, if people were being honest, I was like, we'd all be in the red.
Right.
I was like, at this point, but nobody, everyone's like, man, I'm not going to answer that one like that. Like,
Exactly.
I'm in the green. I'm going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's wild. It's like, so what's the balance, right? If you follow the program, you're probably going to get the results you feared, which is not great, But
We're 70% non-deployable.
exactly right. We don't want to admit that. So
Yeah.
the end result, we all know we had this epidemic of psychological issues and obviously physical disabilities throughout those 2 decades of insurgent warfare in Iraq and Afghanistan. That it's a massive burden on the VA, and maybe a lot of that would have been prevented if those programs had been established early on and carried out through, and everybody had worked. If everything goes to plan, right?
Yeah, and that's the conundrum, right? Like, and I've had these conversations before, like, how can you have mitigated, the amount of injuries, mental, physical, emotional, and that, people are like, well, we're doing better. And this was like in 2017, 16, they're like, we're doing better now, and we had established this before, and it's like, whoa, do you really think, like, people would have been answering truthfully before? Like, I think that's the problem is, like we talked about, the guys want to go.
Right.
They're going regardless. They could be missing a leg, and they're like, and we've had
we've
guys
had 'em.
like,
Yeah.
I'm an amputee, I'm still going, and that's the mindset. So I'm like, where? Yeah, it's that, like, where does this stuff work if guys are going to just do what they have to do to deploy, like, and I think my assessment of it is like, and you see it now, it's like if guys do raise their hands and they're truthful and they're like, hey, I'm having this issue, they are getting yanked. most of the time. They're like, well, okay, you're broken. Get somebody else in there. So then that just negates people from wanting to raise their hand and say, hey, I'm having issues. I think that's part of the problem right there, that they still need to fix.
Yeah. I don't know who fixes it or how you fix it. I don't know the solution.
You and me both. I'm like, I just give my thoughts. I'm like, I don't know what the solution is,
we
but
can accurately paint the picture and describe the problem.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, to finish answering your questions, some guys need to be current on jumping, or they'll go do, they'll get contracted close air support, and so they'll go out on little fake missions and have, they'll talk to aircraft flying around in civilian air spaces that will pretend to do close air support and that type of thing. We did some 2-week little pre-deployment training to spots in Wyoming and set up camp, and they'll run missions, and we'll create fake intel scenarios and disseminate that type of thing. So, yeah, just a lot of strength training, but also, the day-to-day work at the squadron keeps everybody apprised as to what's happening currently in theater, but we're also reach back resources for the stock that's in Bagram. They say, hey, can you put this together for us, or whatever. If things ramp up where they need to surge a little bit, we can exist that way.
okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So 13, you go on that deployment. You said this one's different. It's more you're more hands-on.
Loved it. And yeah, so one of the things that we got from feedback from the 12 deployment was the first time deploying JTACs did not have an adequate training with intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities in the same way that they do with the like the shooter aircraft. So they got a ton of training, in that JTAC role doing that, but for dropping bombs and gun runs and that type of thing, but not for the collecting and the application of intelligence.
Yeah.
And it's been said a lot, and that intel drives operations. So, understanding a need, or intel can a lot of times recognize that there is a situation that needs to be resolved or a place that needs to be secured, and you go and collect on that area and identify threats. It establishes routes going in. It can describe a building, so you create, how you're going to go take that building. All of those things. So that's why we say, intel drives operations. So if you don't understand fundamentally how to apply that ISR, you're going to be ill prepared. A lot of the they understood predators, for example, right? Predators have full motion video balls on them, but they would direct the predators a lot of times just to follow the team as they're going in. But you're not supposed to look at yourself while you're going into a threat area. It's supposed to look out to see where the threat is, where these guys are moving, and you can do all types of other collection. You can look for threats along the way, or whatever.
Like in real time, a predator would be like a drone-ish that would be up in front and go, hey, Eddie, let you know there's 3 guys up to the left. Or
Yeah, that's how
Gotcha.
they're supposed to be applied. Yeah, they have sensors, right? And then you can move those sensors, like, hey, push them up, a certain distance to see where the distance where we're going, to sort of tell us what threats are ahead. Or it's like, hey, it's clear, or you have this, to your west or east, people coming in. So the guys on the ground, as they're patrolling in or doing their infill, everyone's listening. They're supposed to be. And you're like, okay, everybody's on the same page, and they're like, they understand what's coming up. And then the operators themselves can form a plan if they need to. It's like, okay, we have this coming up. This is our contingency for that.
Absolutely. So, Uniquely though, like predators are really popular and in high demand, and there was always a difficulty getting those specific assets. But it's not necessarily important to have that specific asset for this purpose, because there's a ton of other assets that have the same capability.
Yeah.
You know, you could use a fighter jet's targeting pod as the same type of sword. If he's doing nothing else but just flying around in circles, you can task him to do this type of intel collection and report back.
Yeah.
You know, group of military-aged males on the side of the hill with small arms, right?
Gotcha.
So showing them how to do that and request the capability. Hey, we want full motion video. We want signals intelligence. We want route surveillance. You know, we're looking for these types of threats. You know, whatever else. So I got the opportunity to travel around to these small, remote forward operating bases and integrate with the team and spend a week or so with them in the lead up to a specific mission. And I would handle that intel collection for them beforehand, and then apply it through the mission, and then kind of hot wash after the fact and show them how, hey, in the future when I leave, this is how you do that. And it
That's pretty
clicks
cool.
pretty well when it's no kidding, you know, hey, this is my AO here, and this is what we're looking for. And it's different when it's abstract and you're in, you know, the Pacific Northwest and everything's green and lush, and, you know, we're briefing through slides, intel slides, and you're looking at photos of aircraft. It's difficult to translate that into application when you've never been there and you've never actually tried to do that. So that was one of the things that we discovered, and a gap that I was able to fill, and I loved it. I loved that. I loved that mission, and I had big plans to just completely reformat the whole pre-deployment training around the ISR when I got back. So I was really enthusiastic about getting back, not only for that, but obviously my wife was pregnant, and they were actually going to send me back 30 days early so I would be there for the birth of our daughter. So I was out on my commander told me, he's like, I'll send you out this time to this team, but no more, because you got to pack up and head home. So end of September, late September of 13, I go out to a small FOB in southeast Afghanistan in Ghazni province, and I'm with a 7th Special Forces Group team. Combat controllers attached to him, first time deploying guy, great guy, you know, educated. This guy, you know, these guys are all educated. He had a bachelor's degree. He's in his late 20s. You know, he's not just a young buck. He's married. He's got a family and stuff like that. So, really fantastic, competent guy, and the team was wonderful to work with. Really enjoyed that. But, you know, cookie cutter trip out there. I went to a base that this FOB hadn't been attacked in 2 years. Their primary issue was they had gotten all of this HUMINT, that there was heavy machine gun and Dishkas in the area. They couldn't find the enemy. I mean, they were just fundamentally driving around, patrolling, waiting to get shot at, trying to find, you know, to identify where the threat was. So that was kind of the mission of, you know, why I was there. I was trying to help them use ISR to find out where the enemy forces were operating. And everything went well, you know, the requesting the ISR, the application, and then the team went out on their mission and were successful. So the final day that I was there, I was getting ready to leave that day. I spent the night in this transient building they had right in the middle of the FOB. and it's just a well-constructed, it's like half-inch plywood, and it's got sandbags on the roof and to protect from mortars and everything. But it's just a room full of cots for people that come in and out.
Yeah.
So I was there, and I remember I'd woke up at exactly 7. And I looked at my watch, and I was like, that's kind of weird. I didn't set an alarm, but I wake up 7 on the nose, and I kind of rolled over because I couldn't figure out if I wanted to, go ahead and get up and get my workout in before breakfast, because the team goes out in the middle of the night, so they're not going to get up until 10, 11 o'clock maybe, because
Yeah, they're on vampire hours.
yeah, they've and so they're not going to serve breakfast for quite a while. So I was kind of, in that mindset of I'm not going to be able to sleep anymore. So in the next 5 minutes, at 7:05, the base was attacked with a single round of indirect fire, and it came from a 107 millimeter rocket. 107 millimeter rocket it's about that big around, but it's about 3 feet long. And these are left over from the time when the Soviets were there. They left stockpiles, hundreds of these things all around Afghanistan. And the way the insurgents, the Taliban, would use them, you could kind of wire them up any kind of way. Washing machine timer, batteries, you can command detonate it or whatever. But they would even set it up on rocks and kind of aim it towards a base and set it off and hightail it out of there. Most of the time, these things are wildly inaccurate. Right?
Yeah.
Bagram Airfield, Kandahar Airfield, they take 7 to 10 of these indirect fire shots a day, or not a day, a week probably.
Depending, on the season and what's going
there's
on.
an ebb and
But it's
flow.
pretty common occurrence in those big bases like that. They have the sirens go off, rocket attack, and then they have the bunkers that everybody's supposed to hide in. But it's so funny, like when they go off, all of us are like, whatever. And
Nobody
you
even
just
flinches.
No, you're like, the rockets are coming in. People just keep doing what they're
Jeez.
doing
Yep.
because they aren't that inaccurate most of the time.
Exactly. A lot of times they won't even hit inside the wire, right? As big as those bases are, that's what I'm saying. They're wildly inaccurate. Well, not this one. This bad boy comes in, and I'm telling you, I've got an image of this base and the building that I was in. You'll see it's dead in the center. So I'm laying on a cot, abutting a wall at ground level, and the round came in about 3 feet over my head.
Wow.
And like I said, I had just rolled over. So the round comes in right over my head and then it explodes behind me. And I woke up a couple of seconds later, disoriented, kind of looking around, not really understanding what was happening. I knew something significant had happened. There was debris falling from the ceiling. There was dust everywhere. I'm sitting up on the ground, and the cot is up against the wall this way. And I knew I was messed up pretty bad. Both of my lungs were collapsed, so I was really struggling to breathe. But I couldn't figure out what had happened. I had no frame of reference. This was the first time being blown up, right? So all of us had gotten combat trauma training prior to going to Afghanistan, live tissue training where, we actually perform things like needle chest decompression on live animals to be able to respond in case something like that happens either to yourself or to one of your teammates. You're able to be, a first responder in effect and provide really critical life-saving measures before the 18 Delta gets there or, the PJ arrives and provides a higher level of care before medevac gets there and takes them to a field hospital. So having recognized the symptoms that I was experiencing, I began to scramble and try to get to my IFAC that was on my kit that had just been blown 20 feet away. So Thanks,
There it
Dom.
is.
Wow. Look at that.
Cool.
Nice.
Wow, thank you.
Some storyboards
So-
from there.
Yeah. So your wife just brought in obviously the rocket
Yeah.
that came in.
Yeah, so this is the literal rocket body. So this is where the propulsion would have been in the bottom half of it. And the top part, which is, it's about 3 times larger than this, blows off in fragments and sends shrapnel. But this is a cap that I was wearing while I was out, and that took a lot of damage, so I get to keep that. And I was actually reading this collection of C.S. Lewis stories while I was there, and that took a lot of shrapnel damage. That hole right there is really unique, and I'm gonna talk about that in just a second. So as you can see from the storyboard, and this kind of gives it a description, you can see where the building was that I was in, and how that round comes in from a couple of miles away. You can see the debris inside the room where it was, the size of the hole, and it just kind of blew out that whole sheet of plywood panel. And then so you can just kind of envision, my cot was up against the wall there, and how it came in, and took that out.
I just wanted to make mention of something. So this was in his backpack, so it was his favorite hat. Shrapnel went through, big hole. It stopped on that chapter. It like you can rub your little finger across it, and then you can look at the subsequent pages, and they're
That chapter's called The Problem
It's called The Problem of Pain.
with Pain.
The Problem of Pain. So C.S. Lewis,
And it stopped, literally.
he's
and you
a
can run your finger right there.
philosopher that
Stop right
in The Problem of Pain, he kind of wrestles with the concept of that common question of, like, why does God allow evil to good people and prosper bad people? Why do we have to suffer? Why do things like that seem unfair?
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So that's one of those things that I always kind of point back to, kind of God revealing a little bit of the circumstances around what had happened. So I know you can appreciate the accuracy of this particular shot.
Oh, that's $1 million shot right there.
The proximity that I was to the explosion, and the fact that I survived is
A miracle.
it is a miracle.
It is, because that's a direct hit on you.
Yeah.
I mean, for the people listening, like, obviously you can't see these pictures, but where this rocket hit, I mean, it hit, there's a plywood wall in between you and it, and that's it. It hit right where you were at. So the fact that you are still here today, being able to talk about that is a miracle.
Yeah, and you can see the ceiling panels that came down as the rocket travels through the wall, explodes inside, and all the ceiling panels come down. So, the team, the ODA, as they do, ran towards the sound of the explosion and into the building, which I'm grateful for. And they came in to see me, moving towards my IFAC to try to begin
Self-aid.
yeah, self-aid. And there's sandbags just raining down, and they thought the building was going to collapse. So this one staff sergeant, combat engineer, comes in and lays me down, and I told him what was going on, and he hollers for the 18 Delta to come in, and they began treating me. So they ended up doing 2 needles on each side, and I was conscious through the whole thing, and I just I was full of adrenaline. I really wasn't feeling any pain at the time. My only concern was breathing again. And I was kind of fascinated, to be honest, just kind of watching everything happen. He ended up having to do chest tubes on each side.
That's painful.
And he told me, he was like, "You're not going to like this. It's going to hurt."
Yeah.
He's like, "Are you okay? Do you want me to?" I was like, "Go for it." Like, I got these really shallow breaths. So I remember those tubes going. So he was like, "I've never done this before." And like I
That's
said,
always something you want to hear
yeah,
too.
we've got the building raining down on us. There's dust everywhere. There's nothing sterile, obviously. The whole team's in a panic, right? Half of them are going to do security. Half of them are, the combat controllers trying to call medevac. Medevac's not wanting to come in because the area's hot. And so he simultaneously deployed a pair of helicopters that had just checked on the station to the point of origin, and made the area, clear for the medevac. But they're still 30 minutes away. So the 18 Delta does a tube on each side, and I just remember that first big breath that I took in, and just the feeling of oxygen coming back to my brain was such a relief. It was fantastic. So, I told him that was good, and he was like, "Okay, we're gonna roll you over and check out your back." And you guys use profanity on this?
You say whatever you
Okay.
want, brother.
All right, so I'm going to quote what he says. So they roll me up, and the 18 Delta said, "Oh, fuck, we're going to need more chest seals." And that's when I knew. I was like, that's not good, right? So he starts slapping chest seals. He's like, "Give me whatever you got," duct tape and everything else. So I knew it was very severe. I couldn't tell, right, how bad it was at the time, but I knew it was pretty critical.
Well, yeah, if you're using multiple chest seals on a bunch of exit wounds, that's probably all shrapnel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not a good sign.
Yeah. Well, they were all entry wounds.
They went through into your back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the highest one that I have came through. Actually, this was a through and through. So it came all the way through my trap up here, and cut a lot of that off. But you can see the scarring there. A great deal of it was absorbed into my upper back. I had some in my lower back that came through. I severed my right ureter, and it transected my colon. I've got all the way down the back of my legs. I had a big chunk taken out of my lower calf that was big and open for a while. But the blast fractured my T1 and T2 vertebrae. And what I didn't realize at the time was that it began to swell internally in my spinal cord, around my spinal cord. And the last thing I remember, before they loaded me up on the helicopter, they had put me on a litter. Everybody was around, and I looked up at the 18 Delta and I said, "Hey man, my foot doesn't really feel right. Like it's not responding correctly." He said, "Don't worry, bro. We got you. They're going to take care of you. You're going to be fine." And so then they loaded me up onto the helicopter, and it was lights out after that. And
Did they administer anything to you for pain or like ketamine?
no, they just knocked me out in the helicopter.
Okay.
Right. So they had started an IV previously. When they got in the helicopter, that's when they went ahead and knocked me out, or gave me whatever.
Yeah.
So I found out after the fact that I died several times on the helicopter on the way to Bob Gosney, and went through at least 5 surgeries. They had to give me 42 units of blood after the fact. Matter of fact, they had to go out and recruit live donors because they had run out of their O neg supply, and to find everybody that's O negative and get them to come in and just directly
Yeah.
donate to me at the time. So they kind of stabilized me there. They moved me up to Bagram. The whole time that, my unit came and got to see me before I left, and they didn't think I was going to survive. So on the other side of the world, my wife is 6 months pregnant at this time. She is woken up at 6:30 in the morning with a knock on the door, and she hobbles down the stairs and opens the door, and the acting commander's there with the chaplain and the flight doc. And she knew immediately, like, hey, this is the biggest fear that I've ever had. This is the worst time. And, she's like, is he alive? And you can imagine when the doc's like, for now, like, kind of. It's a terrible thing to hear, right?
Yeah.
He wants to give her so much hope, but at the same time, he wants to be really truthful. Right? It doesn't really look good. Over the next few days, the squadron came out and stayed with her, helped get affairs in order, told her to pack up to head maybe to D.C. They thought they were going to have to fly her to Germany to see me. If I was going to pass, they wanted her to be with me in Germany. They didn't know if I'd make it all the way back to the United States. They had the flight doc actually travel with her because they were afraid the stress was going to push her into preterm labor. So obviously it was a harrowing time for her. I always tell everybody, my wife suffered at least as much trauma as I did.
Yeah.
With completely different, but at least as much. So I wake up like 2 weeks later after the event, after the attack at Walter Reed, and I'm breathing through a hole in my neck on a ventilator, paralyzed from the chest down. My wife's there with her hair and makeup done, and a beautiful blue dress, and a little basketball belly right out in front of her. And that's when I learned my fate, I didn't really have a concept of paralysis. I'd never dealt with anybody that had paralysis. It certainly hadn't sunk in as a long-term thing. My group commander came and was there, and I told him, I was like, I just want to get up and go back, right? Like that's what I felt at the time. But he came to let me know that the combat controller had done what he was supposed to do, and they had taken the shooters out, right? So the guys that fired the rocket, they had taken those guys out.
They located them and
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Said, as a matter of fact, the helicopters are already on the way back to base, so they decided not to take any ammo back with them. Just went full bore on them. So so that was good. But yeah, we had some pretty. It was the first real realization kind of came, or the first kind of psychological impact came. We had this neurologist that came into the room, and she said, "Hey, I want to sit down with you and your wife." And she said, "Nate, I'm just going to level with you, man. You're paralyzed from the chest down. You're never going to walk again for the rest of your life. Your wife is likely going to be your permanent caregiver for everything that you're used to doing. She's going to have to help you get dressed. She's probably going to have to help you eat. She's going to have to help you shower and go to the bathroom. You're not going to have any more kids. It's unlikely that you're going to work ever again. And the faster you come to terms with this, the better off you're going to be.
Sweet. So what's the bad news?
Yeah. So this just hit me in the face, and my wife was pissed, right? She's like a lioness, like circling, me right at this point. And her attitude about it was like, how dare you come into here and kick him while he's down, right? How
She's
do you
got a point.
squash any hope that this man has of recovery at all? I mean, she told her to get the fuck out of my room. She was pretty rude about it. But my perspective, the thing that really hit me was, man, if I'm not going to be able to do anything, if I'm going to be 100% dependent on somebody else for the rest of my life, what's the point?
Yeah, and that's where I agree with your wife, where it's like, why would you come in and just lay that all on you in one fell swoop after you just went through the most traumatic experience you've ever had? It's called, it's what's that? Bedside manner. Mm-hmm. It's like, hey, it's lead into it a little bit and not dump like, hey, dude, you're worthless for the rest of your life.
Right.
Deal with it. And it's like, well, how do you, what kind of like psychological impact do you think that's having on the individual, emotional impact that's having on them? And not only them, but on your wife, who obviously did the right thing and blew up. I mean, I would, same thing.
Yeah, I'm grateful for her. I really am. But I'll tell you what happened to me in that moment. So in that moment where those kind of natural thoughts are filling my head, God reminded me, and this, I'm telling you, it was such a wild moment because it was such a real impart on me that I got this thought and feeling and truth that wasn't mine, right? Where God said, hey, remember that I have a plan and a purpose for everything. I'm in control of everything, not you. And there's also a reason for all of this, if you trust me. And for me, that was really reassuring. And I don't know that ever in my life before it necessarily would have been. Because that was always something that I knew and trusted and believed, but now it's a reality like it hadn't been before. And so I had always kind of, I was raised in a church. I had faith. I was a believer. There was certainly a long period of time where I wasn't behaving like I was. But that was always something that I never faltered on my belief. But I always kind of lived my life like, well, I'm kind of ambling along, and I've always, I don't want to say check the box for eternity, but like I wasn't, mission oriented or anything like that. To me, it felt like a special tasking that I was receiving. Like, hey man, God's got a specific plan for you, and I need you to go through this specific trial for this other purpose that I have for you over here, down the road, right? So I got to derail you off what you're doing right now, take you through this arduous, period of time in your life, because I got something over here for you. So
Did that hit you at that moment?
in that moment, that's exactly how it, and so for me, it was like a degree of excitement about the expectation for what was to come, right? So it's like, man, over there, I've got a unique tasking, right? I didn't know what it was. But it was still hard, right? So the next couple of years, I'm struggling through rehab and trying to get accustomed to the way my body acts or doesn't act anymore, and psychological issues and frustrations and traumatic brain injury and, new conditions that, I just was completely unfamiliar with previously. And to say it was frustrating is really an understatement. It's
I-
difficult
I
time.
imagine.
Can only
Right?
imagine, man. Yeah, I mean, just the fact that you're paralyzed from the chest down. You're now like, and I think that's insane or like awesome that you had that feeling from God right at that moment. That's like, okay, like sort of like this is challenge accepted. Okay, God, like I'll do this. But I mean, it's a challenge, and then just going through. I can't imagine going through rehab like, okay, this is my new life, but at the same time, you're probably setting expectations for yourself, like, oh, I'm going to do this. Like, this is what I'm going. And then I'm sure there were setbacks, like, nope, it's not happening, or something like,
I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
So, I'd been with the 22nd for over a year, and I, integrated as best as I possibly could. I was in the best shape of my life, right? I'm 6'1", and at the time of my injury, I was about 205, and just strong as I've ever been, just feeling great, lifting heavy, and constantly improving. I lost 80 pounds in the next 2 months.
Jeez.
So from 23 September till Thanksgiving, I dropped down to 125 pounds. And I looked like I had just gotten rescued out of Auschwitz or something. I mean, I was just bones. Face was completely sunken in. And, I went from, like I said, lifting really heavy to now I'm at the VA in Tampa doing rehab where we're picking up cotton balls and trying to put them in a cup. Like, this is my therapy for today. In my mind,
Oh, yeah. I can only imagine.
that's right. Like, this is not who I am. Like, a minute ago, I'm feeling the best I've ever been in my life. I'm in command of my little universe, right? I'm living the American dream, right? I got my beautiful wife and my daughter coming along. We got our house and 2 cars in the driveway. I'm at the bottom of a fantastic, upwardly mobile career. I just finished a master's degree, and all the stuff, right? And I can see the road ahead. And even though I had that revelation, I concurrently struggled with the very human feelings that I was experiencing. And admittedly, often today, still feel those frustrations.
Because you're human.
Because I am.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very difficult thing.
Yes.
And difficult to describe. Even to my wife that's been with me through all of that. It's like, why am I irritable about something, or why didn't I ask for help when she could be there? And those things that have been kind of a struggle like between us a lot of times is because man, I want to do that, and I should be able to do that.
Because that's your personality, that's your drive. You wouldn't have gone into the profession that you were in or been with those group of individuals if you did not have that. Like, I'm going to do this. This is my thing. Mm-hmm. I've accomplished all these things. And you have, but I can only imagine. Yeah, it's still to this day, I'm sure, frustrating. Like you said, to where it's like you still have that natural human tendency or alpha tendency, like, no, I should be able to do this, and then a lot of us, I'm guilty of it too, is like, I don't want to ask for help because I want to do it myself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's plenty of things in my life. I mean, she's got to bear a lot of the load now for things that I obviously would have done, but I'm really fortunate because she's naturally industrial anyway. She builds tables and dressers and stuff like that for fun and whatever. So, but yeah, it's a frustrating thing. I mean, you can see the neurological damage that I took to my hand. So my injury not only comes across my chest, it runs down the middle of both of my arms, and a lot of the muscles in my hands aren't innervated, so you can see kind of how they atrophied and whatnot. This hand is a little bit more useful, and I can articulate each of the fingers, although I can't flare them out, so I can't separate the fingers this way. This one over here is more functional now after I had a tendon transfer. They actually took a tendon from here, wrapped it around, and attached it to my thumb, so I can bring it this way and then pinch, so I can pick up, a bottle or whatever and drink with that. And they fused my fingers to where they're curved that way, so it's functional. A lot easier to push the wheelchair with that. Previously, I was just kind of palming it along. But
How much progress have you made since the original, like through PT and all that stuff? I mean, where you're at today? 'Cause that was 2013, you said?
yeah, so it'll be 11 years this September. Phenomenal, right? So, if you fast forward to today, I live almost completely independently, capable of being independent, right? I can be at home with my 2-year-old, right? Just me and him, and we're completely fine. I can, load him up in the car, get him out. I can cook. So all those doctors' prognosis, I can, feed myself. I can cook. I can shower myself. I can use the restroom on my own. I can dress myself.
Have kids.
I can have kids, right?
That's awesome.
And so
Screw that up.
Yeah, it's so awesome.
So all of those things are so fantastic, but it certainly didn't happen. It really didn't happen while I was in rehab. Rehab was a really difficult time. I suffered from a lot of low blood pressure issues. When you lose muscle tone in your lower extremities, you don't have it doesn't pump back up in your brain. So I struggled with that for several years until I moved up here and went through hyperbaric oxygen treatment. For some reason, it completely resolved my low blood pressure issues.
That's awesome. Where did you do that at?
In Fort Walton Beach at Dr. Zant's.
Yeah, I went there. Yep.
Did you?
Yeah, I did
Fantastic.
60 dives. Yeah.
Fantastic.
He's awesome.
He's great.
Yeah.
Super great. The other thing too, with that hyperbarics, I went in hoping for some neurological recovery. I actually ran into Montel Williams at Walter Reed, who showed up. He saw my wife, and he was like, "Yeah, take me to Nate." And so I come out of this test, and there's my wife pregnant, and there's Montel Williams right there, and he says, "Hey Nate, I'm Montel Williams. Listen, man, don't worry about it. You're going to be walking in like 5 years. I want you to look into what they're doing with hyperbarics. So ask your doctor."
He's like, this is how you do it.
Yeah. I was like, great. I'm glad you figured it out. So I actually asked the VA docs about it. She said, yeah, that's not FDA approved, and nobody's getting up and walking from that. But I thought I'd give it a shot. I told folks, I was like, look, I don't care if you tell me some, Haitian lady, witch doctor in Port-au-Prince could throw some chicken blood on me and get me walking again.
I'll do it.
I'll be on the next flight. You know what I'm saying?
Don't do it.
So didn't have anything to lose. So, but it was fantastic benefits. The other big part of it, which he was really anticipating, was the cognitive improvements
Yes.
from the TBI that I had. You take a blast that close, it messes some stuff up in the cranium. But I actually didn't recognize internally the issues that I had. I mean, I knew that I struggled to formulate words, really. I didn't really trust the natural flow of thought like I had before. So I'd always kind of internalize it and make sure that what I was thinking made sense before I said anything. But it made communication so difficult. But after I went through those, actually it hit at 15 dives, like 3 weeks, and it was like the fog lifted off my
Yeah.
brain. I'm speaking with the flow of thought, it just naturally, and my mood improved. I felt enthusiastic. I don't know. So I'm really grateful for Dr. Zant and his hyperbarics, and it's definitely something that I recommend.
I had similar reactions from it. Same. Because I went there. I did 60, and I was like, yeah, it feels like the clouds have been sort of separated a little bit, and I can start thinking a little bit more clearly. And I did feel a little bit better, like mood or emotionally wise.
Yeah, I couldn't even see it's like you can't even see that you're in the fog until the
No,
clouds
you
lift.
don't know.
Wow.
I think that's one of the things about TBI that people don't understand is like if you have it, you don't really know you have it. Like you can function with a TBI, you can keep going, which a lot of guys do, and that are still in, and they just don't know that they have it because they're so used to functioning in that manner. It's like, okay, now I just can't, think as much, or I have problems like I had issues just thinking through problem sets after a while. It was like, and I would get frustrated, but you don't know. You're just like, oh, I'm just tired, but it's like, no, you're not tired. You have a TBI. Yeah.
Yeah. That didn't get properly healed.
Yeah.
You didn't take the adequate rest immediately after the traumatic event, and now there's issues, and then guys, they'll do their 20, and then they're being evaluated after the fact. They go get an MRI, and it's like, oh, you've got 18 lesions on your brain. Like, well, no wonder I'm a little cranky or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe I do fly off the handle a little fast, but yeah, that's definitely one of those effects.
What was it like when being there for the birth of your baby girl?
Grateful that I was still alive, excited, just in awe of her and my wife, but concurrently terrified, right? See, I had just gotten the trach out of my neck and the cervical collar off when she was born. We went from the VA hospital in Tampa across town to St. Joseph's to deliver. We spent the weekend there and then immediately went back to inpatient at the VA. And that's where Eva spent the first year of her life, in that hospital with me. So, I was glad to be there, and the doc let me help bring her out and everything. But I'm looking at her and I'm holding her, and I'm thinking about my hands that are just weak, holding her up, and like just thinking, hey, how am I going to do this, right? I certainly am not going to be physically be the father that I had always envisioned myself being beforehand. Like, what does it look like now is something that I've had to create as I'm going, which, leads to other, frustrations and whatnot. But, yeah, that's, I definitely was feeling a lot there. But, we got better. We pushed through a lot of struggles. The best thing for me, I got completely tired of being in the VA. It's like, I gotta leave, for better or worse.
I can imagine, it was almost like a setback after a while. Like, dude, I'm not going to be able to push forward by being in this environment, because were you around a lot of other injured amputees, and yeah.
So we were I was in a spinal cord injury unit, and the polytrauma, massive TBI clinic was up above, so we kind of did PT together. And we tried to stay as positive as we possibly could. That was always our mentality is, hey, we're going to joke about everything. We're going to make light. We're going to try to be personable, and be happy. And you know, a lot of the guys there, they didn't have the family support that I had. There was a Green Beret that came in shortly after I did with the same injury that I had that manifest in the same way. So he's injured at the same level. And he did not have the reaction that I had. We had a similar situation. He had a young daughter who was 3 or 4 at the time, and he was married. And he did not want his wife taking care of him.
He wanted it to end, or
and
pretty much.
And he filed divorce while he was in there.
And you know what? I can see that route going that route too. I mean, I think that would, it's like, I remember through my career going, doing all those pumps back there, and guys would remember asking themselves questions like, hey man, or like even going on an op, like, hey, if I get hit, IED or something, and my junk's gone, just put a bullet in me. Like, don't even bother saving me. Like,
Yeah.
But it was half joking, but it was like sort of half serious. And you're like, no, to me, and like hearing your story now, I'm like, and I've had a lot of friends that are, amputees and got injured, and to see them bounce back and like fight through it, I'm like, that's a struggle that no one could ever, I think, comprehend unless you are actually in it, going through it. And to make those statements, and I made them too. I'm like, dude, yeah, if that happens, just end me, because I think to us as men, it's like, well, then I'm just worthless.
Right.
Like and that's a false statement, right? But that's our own selfish, manly ways of being like, dude, if I can't do certain things, then I don't want to be here. But we don't realize that, like, our families, especially if you have a wife like yours, I have one the same, like, they don't care. They want you around. Like, they want you for you, but I think for a lot of us, it's hard to imagine, like, doing that, so I can only imagine, like, being in that environment with, like you talked about, that Green Beret, that's like, hey, you have the outlook of, I'm going to, like, challenge accepted, I'm going to make something of this, but then you're with other dudes that are like complete opposite end of the spectrum. And I imagine after a while being around those individuals and you with your positive outlook, that some of that can start bringing you down too, and have an effect.
It could.
If you let it.
If you let it, yeah. I tried to compensate the other way, and for me it caused me to push harder, right? So almost like positive shame the guy into changing his mind,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So like you see him to come to PT, I just flip over and start cranking out push-ups real quick,
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff, right? And like show him that I'm going to push as hard as I did before, and not
Set the example.
exactly, right? I don't know if it had any effect on him or not, but
You never know.
I tell you what, the best thing in the world though for me was getting out of there. I was like, man, I just got to get away from here. I'm not growing anymore here. I'm stagnant. I dread I'd transitioned to we rented a house there, and I transitioned there, but we were still going back for appointments 3 or 4 days a week. I'm not doing anything at the house. And so I said, I called up my headquarters. I was like, hey, can you just put me back to work? Like, can I just come to the office? And they're like, well, if you leave that setting, it's going to initiate your MEB. I'm like, I'm not going to hang out for another 10 years to get 20, right? I'm not, like, that's not going to happen. So,
It's a medical retirement board.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to initiate the MEB, and then, you're going to be medically retired. I was like, that's fine, right? I just want to leave. So that's what we did. We moved up to Navarre up here, and I went to, put on the uniform and rolled into the skiff at the Special Tactics Group, and got back trying to support the warfighter until my time was done. I still went to appointments, you know, they told me, hey, you know, do as much as you physically can, and if you got to go somewhere, like, we understand or whatever. But it was the best thing for me, just
Yeah.
getting up every day, getting into a routine,
Purpose.
driving myself to work, pushing around, navigating obstacles, and that type you just can't do in a clinical setting. And, you know, understand how I'm going to reintegrate into the world in my new condition, which is the most beneficial thing for me. So, besides the hyperbarics, that really gave me the capability to functionally work a career after that.
Yeah, it gave you like a purpose again, like, hey, I'm going back to work. I've got something to do. And
Sure.
yeah, these obstacles are in my way. I have this, but I can overcome it and still get my job done. And it's like a new challenge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I retired at the end of 15, and didn't really know what I was going to do with my life after that. But I ended up connecting with Matt Gates when he was a state rep, and so that 2016 time frame, you know, he decided he was going to run for Congress, and I did a campaign ad for him, and then after he won the primary, he asked if I would join his team and be his director of military affairs. So I served in that position for 4 years, which I loved. I mean, it was all, you know, I get to serve the warfighter in a completely different perspective, right? Understanding from NAS Pensacola, Whiting, Hurlburt, Eglin, 7th Group, you know, all of these missions, understanding them, articulating their needs to the congressman who's going to go up there and get them resources from the NDAA, aligning the community towards that military mission, supporting that military mission. Here in Northwest Florida, most people think about tourism, but defense spending is actually our primary economic driver here. So it's hugely important. And so I really dove into that. Got an opportunity to integrate in this community all the way across the region, right? So it's not just a handful of people that I would have known. I met thousands of people very quickly. So I was really grateful for him for giving me that opportunity and entrusting me with that responsibility. So
Yeah, Matt's a really good guy.
yeah,
Heard good things.
Yeah.
He's ballsy. I'll tell you that.
He is.
He's
Yeah.
done a ton of stuff where I'm like,
He
didn't
helped
know
us
where
out
he was-
tremendously.
I didn't know where he was going with this or that or the other, but I saw it after the fact. I'm not surprised. I didn't know that he did. I'm not surprised because that's the kind of person he is. I mean, he would just tell me, like, hey, just tell me what I need to do, right? Just, you don't have to convince me to do something. Just tell me what I need to do, right? So I was always really grateful for him. So yeah, and since then, you know, professionally, there's been continued growth. So I look back on, you know, God's plan for my life. It's like I didn't even hit a snag even with that shift in career. It's been just really a steady growth just professionally, what I've been able to do from the congressman's office, doing some consulting work afterwards, getting involved with a bunch of nonprofits and advocating for them and getting grants and that type of thing for specific missions. And now I work for a defense contractor in Niceville that engineers primarily Air Force weapons, but, you know, expanding their scope into other things, special operations, different community projects that can, you know, kind of open their aperture a little bit more. It's been fantastic, and it's always built on the previous thing, which is really good. So, getting to continue to use the skill sets that I have, right? The
Yeah.
communication and the connections, the connections that I've had before, not only with Big Blue Air Force, but with the Special Operations community. You know, the 7th group, I've got great relationships with everybody up there because, you know, they treat me like family because I was with their team
Yeah.
when I got hit, and they put me back together, you know, and so I've always praised their capabilities, but you know, I'm fortunate to be in this area just because of the strong military presence that we have here.
So are you still doing that right now?
Yeah, I'm working for the defense contractor.
Okay,
Yeah, great team.
really cool. And then you also give talks, right, on resiliency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have been speaking since probably 2016. I got invited, and it's always local groups, and they'll invite me to come share my story, and I really didn't know how to frame it initially, but when I got asked to do that, I'm like, hey, what is my main takeaway from all of this? What is my lesson that I need to share? What is the fundamental truth? And it was the faith piece, right? It was, don't discount faith. Make it the center cornerstone of your life, because that's not something that you want to establish after catastrophe hits, right? Because something's going to go wrong, right? It doesn't matter. Everybody suffers from something, right? You got a wayward child, or your wife gets cancer, or you face bankruptcy. There's all kinds of tragedy and suffering that happens in the world, and we don't know where it's going to come or how it's going to manifest. But you don't want to go find faith after that. When you're in the midst of the struggle, you want to fall back to that. You know,
That's a good word.
yeah, you know, when you probably know the quote better than I do. You know, when the shit hits the fan, you don't rise to the occasion. You fall to your best level of training. Right?
Yeah.
Something. I want to paraphrase it, right? And that's it. That's the truth, right? So that's what happened to me, and you know, I came back and said, well, I've lost everything physically. I can't even think straight. So what value do I have? Well, my fundamental purpose on this earth is to serve God, right? And His missions. Go into all nations and make disciples, right? I still have a voice, so I can still at least accomplish that. So I have purpose. And it made me realize that I'm 30 years old, and I've professed to be a Christian since I was 10. So for the last 20 years, I haven't done any of that. Well, that's kind of freaking embarrassing, right? If that's my primary mission on this earth. So I decided I was going to change that, right? And change everything around, hey, this is my core mission, right? I can be employed by whoever, the congressman or self-employed or the IS4S or whatever. But my core mission is sharing my faith with other people, right? So if they're going to invite me to speak, I'm going to talk about resiliency. But that resiliency piece is, I'm going to say, hey, spiritual resiliency gets overlooked in the Department of Defense, gets left off in the end. They hammer the physical, they hammer the psychological, the mental and the social, right? Believing in your wingman, your battle buddy, whatever. And they say, and spiritual resiliency is important too. There's the chaplain over there if you want to talk to him. Okay, moving on, right? Guys, don't drink a job this weekend, right? That's the way those briefings go. And I'm like, man, that's the foundation from which everything else matters.
Yep.
And if you discount that, you completely lost because the physical goes away in a snap. You lose it all, right? What happens when you lose all that, right? What happens when your friends and your social circle, like, they love you, but they're like, I don't know what to do here in this situation. I don't know what to say or whatever. So it feels like those have, drifted away. What happens when psychologically, you're wrestling with all of these issues, right, that you never could foresee before. I fell back to that foundation, and that's where I grew from. So I had a lot of people that invited me to speak, and they wanted to hear the war story and I don't know what they expected really, but I told them that I think I can surprise them, and I told them about my faith in Christ, and regardless of what the speech was about or the fundraiser was about or whatever, I'm going to get to this point. I don't care if you came here to hear that today. I'm going to get this out, right? So I'm going to accomplish my mission, right? So I started speaking about that, and then I kind of built the speech and said, hey, here's, the DOD would say there's 4 pillars of resiliency. This is how they would present that information. Here's how it looked in my life, and here's how it applied. Yeah, the physical was really important. One of the reasons I'm alive today is because I had a lot of back muscle that absorbed a lot of shrapnel that didn't reach my heart and lungs and spleen and all of that. So, that's really important. And if I don't continue to train and stay physically capable, I'm going to degrade much faster than everybody else, just because of the wheelchair and everything. The mental is important too, and just staying positive, being around other positive people uplifts you. Added in financial resiliency as well, hugely important, right? People live paycheck to paycheck. Well, what are you going to do when everything hits the fan? We just had, in the same week, we had invested some money for our kids in some custodial accounts for 401ks for long-term, right? So we had moved a significant amount of money over there, but then our AC unit completely dumped, and we got to completely replace it, and my van broke yesterday, right? So, I'm calling the wife, and I'm like, I'm glad we had that emergency fund, because that's
what it's for.
It's what it's for, right? And when we went through all of that turmoil, when Jen was working a nice little career with a beer distributor in Tacoma, and but we weren't financially reliant on her salary in order to pay the bills.
Yeah.
We weren't stretched so thin.
You're living below your means.
Yeah, she had to completely leave her job, right? The DOD was still paying me, but we had a house note to float, and, all kinds of other responsibilities. But can you imagine all the stress that she was under? Hey, is my husband going to survive? How am I going to have this baby? How am I going to take care of this 2 dependents right now? Can you imagine being financially strapped, not worrying about, am I going to have enough money to
Buy diapers.
buy diapers and all of this other stuff?
Yeah.
It would have been terrible. Fortunately, that was not something that we had to worry about, because we had been prepared, right? We'd followed that. But yeah, so I go through that, each of those elements, and then stress the spiritual foundation, the spiritual component of it, and why it was.
You won't be able to navigate all those other ones you won't be able to navigate them properly without having that spiritual component instilled and having that faith, because I think that's what enables you to go through the physical, emotional, financial, all those struggles that are going to happen at some point. And if you are not prepared, if you do not have that foundation, that faith, that belief, then that struggle just times it by 100. Like, because you think you're going to be able to do it on your own. Like, good luck with that. Right. And that's where, I have guys that are, they're not believers, and they're good dudes. And I tell them, I'm like, and just like you said, I was like, dude, you don't realize until you're big, you're strong, you're this and that. When one of those components is taken from you, you're going to be lost, because you don't realize how much you depend on yourself. And that's great that you're physically fit, you have all these things going for you. I was like, but if you don't have faith and you don't have Christ in your life, once one or two of those things are taken from you, dude, you're going to be on the struggle bus, and it's going to be a long, long, long hill to climb. But I was like, if you set your faith now, start, reading the Bible, start, just having trust in God. I'm like, that hill becomes a lot shorter, or he will push you up it at a speed that you have no idea, like how you're actually doing it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So I've got kind of two different perspectives, right? I give the resiliency speech to secular audiences, large in part, and then I got another one that I give to faith-based groups where I talk more in my kind of spiritual life, and it's the same story, right? It's the same components, the same structure, but it's almost like a call to arms after the fact. This is, the purpose of suffering. This is why the Apostle Paul said, rejoice in your suffering, because it builds character and perseverance and hope. And, what do we do with all this character when we have it? Well, we've got a mission, and everybody's got a mission. And your mission's not to show up to church on Sunday and, throw a 20 in the offering plate. Man, that's not your mission. Is to go out and make disciples. And we've all got to arm up, put on the full armor of God. And because we are legitimately fighting spiritual battles out there. Take a look at culture today. You can see the imposition or the degradation rather of societal values, and that is it. That is where the battle happens.
Well, yeah.
It happens on social media. It happens on, face to face. It happens.
It's the devil's playground right now out there,
is.
and that's what people don't realize is he is invited into all sorts of things right now, and he is just causing chaos and having a grand old time. And if you don't have faith, and if you don't realize what's going on, and not able to see past the human aspect or societal aspect, and be like, dude, this is what's going on right now. There's good and evil. Then you are going to slip into the evil, because that's what the devil does the best. Is
And
he disguises himself.
Yeah, and you have to recognize that you are supposed to be involved in this war.
Yeah.
You signed up for this battle, right? Suit up and employ that weapon that you've got, right? Prayer, right? Just like prayer is a huge component of that. So anyway, like I said, it's a call to arms, and I like that one a lot better than the resiliency one. Because I get a lot more emotional and fired up about it. You know what I mean?
Almost
Energized.
like it's your calling. It's
Almost,
your
Yeah.
That's right. And then at the end, I'm like, guys, thank you for inviting me here and letting me accomplish my mission.
Yeah.
Right?
Hey, what's so cool about your story is, we that's what we do at least once a week ish, is hear people's stories, right? And a lot of our guests so far have been really authentic, and the more authentic, the more me and Eddie are like, oh man, that was great, because it's not like, hey, you had that happen, you had this. I'd say like God spoke to you directly. I mean, just without a doubt, and then you struggled and went. I mean, there was probably great times and then horrible times and great times, and it's like that's the truth of it. It wasn't like you got that and then you're like, from then on, I just it's.
Yeah, well, that's what I said, like, even at the beginning, which I liked. You said that. You're like, I still struggle with certain things. And that's where I think some Christians sell, like, this bag of, like, fake gold where it's like, oh, no, just if you have faith, you're good. And it's like, no, life's a struggle. Like, struggle will never go away. And, like, one of my favorite verses is, like, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, right?
Yeah.
It's like, that's how you should look at life, is like, okay, another struggle, great. I'm going to topple this, and then the next one that comes along, I'm going to topple that. And the more you do that, the more you become, more resilient, stronger, spiritually, emotionally, physically, because you are putting yourself in those struggles and you are getting through them. But I think that people sell this like, well, you know, if you do this, everything's going to be fine. And it's like, no, dude, life is not fair.
No.
And you should accept that right off the bat. Like, life's not going to be fair, and it's going to throw things at you that are going to beat you down. And I was like, and if you think you're going to handle that yourself, I'm like, you're sorely mistaken. Like, you are just going to dig yourself into a hole eventually. I was like, you have to have faith. You have to have God at your side. He will carry you through, but he will not do that unless you submit. And that is the hard part for, especially for men, I think, is like, and I was along those same lines. Like, I could definitely resonate with what you were saying. You know, I was raised Catholic, but then when I married my wife, she's a strong Christian, and I was like, sure, I'll be Christian too. You know, like, we believe in the same God. And I was, yes, I went to church every Sunday, but I was more focused on my job. You know, the SEAL teams was like here, God was right, you know, family were right below it, which I learned a valuable lesson in that. But it's not until you fully submit, and that's when I took me till I was 39 to fully submit and be like, take this, you know, whatever you want, take it. Like, I'm giving everything to you. And ever since I've done that, it's been, you know, not a breeze, but it's more, I know I have, when something does come down the pipe, that I'm like, oh shit, like, here we go. At least I have a comfort in knowing, like, I'm going to get through this because I have God behind me or lifting me.
And it's a difficult thing to articulate and explain to people, especially those that are in the midst of the suffering, right? If you're in the midst of the suffering, like, God didn't command the Taliban to fire this, right? He knew it was going to happen. Mm-hmm. And to say that it was part of his will, yes, he allowed the tragedy. Same with you. He didn't force that to happen, but he allowed it because he also knew how it would draw you closer to him, which was the best thing in the world for you, right?
Yes.
The best thing for any of us.
It was a blessing.
Regardless of our circumstances, if you get closer to God because of, you get more God, right? And
He's the treasure.
Exactly. And so it's a wild thing to say, knowing if I could go back and do it all again, would I do it the same way? Of course, right? Because that's ultimately what I would have wanted, even though beforehand I wasn't pursuing it like I should have been.
Yeah.
And I didn't recognize that that's what I needed. And so, you know, it's wild, but, you know, praise God for taking me through, for him taking me through this tragedy, and my wife through this tragedy. I mean, I'm so grateful. I tell people all the time too. I was like, everybody who's married would say, you know, hey, I'd take a bullet for you, I'd walk through fire for you, I'd stick with you regardless or whatever.
Those are just
for better
words.
or worse. I got a woman out there who did it.
Yeah.
Right? And who legit thought I was going to die, or be paralyzed or whatever. And, you know, there's a lot of veterans that suffered catastrophic events, and they did not have. I had a buddy of mine in the VA whose fiance left him when she found out that he was paralyzed. He had been shot in the back in Iraq. And unfortunately for him, it was a friendly fire.
Yes.
And so it's like,
It's tough.
I always tell people too, like, hey, if it's my lot in life to be paralyzed, it's really great that it happened the way it was, because, you know, you get a great story. There's, you know.
Yeah, the enemy did this to me.
Right.
I was out there fighting the enemy.
Right.
And to have, I can only, having a friendly fire. And
I didn't have 6 beers and try to drive home and wreck my car, right?
Yeah.
That's, you know, it's kind of the most honorable way, I guess, perhaps, to be paralyzed or whatever. But
Have you written a book?
I haven't.
Have you ever thought about it?
I have thought about it a few times.
Okay. I think you should. I mean, you got a hell of a story. It's a hell of a testimony, and I think it would. I think a lot of people would be able to resonate with
Eddie
it.
would write it for you.
I think the only, the only hang up, I think the only hang up that I've had in the past was like, I feel like there should be maybe a different threshold that I hit, and then I can say, okay, this is how I got to this point, right?
That's what I
Because
love.
I'm still young. I'm in my prime.
I
41
know,
years
but
old.
that's
man.
what I love about your story is that you're like, hey, if you're not struggling, you're not growing, right?
Right.
And you're not pretending to be some spiritual level that, like, you're like, oh no, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. You're not. It's like
I don't think any of us are ever going
no
to
one
be there
and,
yet.
and we know that, but like a lot of people that speak or tell their story, wherever, it's like, oh, and then now I'm like, and then today, and now I'm there. It's like, okay, I'm further along.
Sure.
Yeah, I think if you like, and this is just my opinion or whatever, but just because I wrote a book about everything, and I was completely against it. I did not want to write the book. I was in a very bad spot when I was doing it. But I think, like, you sitting down, it happened to me, like, you really have to sit down, and it makes you dissect really, like, everything that you've been through, that your family's been through, and you might be able to see some more things by doing that, and then that just helps you even grow even more. And then you don't even have to finish the book. It's just start it and then see where your path is taking you from there, and then continue to add on to it. Just one of those thoughts that came into my mind.
It's a good idea. So my wife she wrote a book from her perspective.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And so later on, when you guys have her on, she can bring that and share it. If I was smarter, I would have had her bring a copy for you, so you can look at that.
Well, we can do that when we have her on. We definitely want you both on
Okay.
for the Truth About Transition series. I think, that would be awesome.
Yeah, that'll be good. But I appreciate your encouragement there, and I think I will. I've had some almost starts with that, with that, but I think you're right. I think the spiritual perspective there's a lot of depth to it, and there's a lot of examples that I wish I could have time to speak about when I'm out up speaking on stage, that I just can't, that I think it is really good fleshed out on a page.
Yeah.
If people want to get a hold of you, website?
Do have a website, nathannelsonspeaks.com, and
Do you have an Instagram?
I don't have an Instagram. I have Facebook.
Okay.
So yeah.
Look you up on Facebook. If they want to contact you to come speak or do something like that, is the website the best?
Yeah, absolutely. Website's the best. You should have my email on there directly. So email's fantastic.
I have found you on.
Awesome, dude. Thank you for your story.
Speaker?
I've got an Instagram.
Wait.
That's not him.
Nope. No, that's not.
It was another Nathan Nelson.
It was
Another speaker.
another guy in a wheelchair.
No kidding.
Yeah. Dude. Let me see.
You need to get a hold of him.
No, I'm just a dime a dozen, right? No, that's me. That's me.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That is him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's on Instagram?
It's under, because he sent me your website, so I looked over it, and then I was like, oh, I wonder if he's on, and I looked that up on Instagram and found you.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Eddie's
Well,
quite.
you learned something. You got
So
an
have an
Instagram.
agency.
You got an
He's the
Instagram page.
I did have
Social
an
media
agency that
butterfly.
Exactly.
I did have an agency that helped build the website
Yeah.
and put everything together, so they might have done that, and I just didn't realize it. So.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks guys for having me on.
Dude, no, thank you for coming on, dude. Honestly, this was a very this was just you have a great story, man.
100%.
And your purpose and like the lessons learned from your story and what you're doing now. I mean, it's like you said, God doesn't put anything on your plate that you can't handle, and He does it so you can help others. And I can't imagine how many other people that you're helping by telling your story. I mean, you're sitting here speaking to it, and as you can see with these pictures that you've showed us, in any other circumstance, you wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So it's like we said, it was a miracle that you survived, but miracles happen for a reason.
That's right. And thank you for what you're doing. I'd heard about the events surrounding your story when they happened. I didn't realize that you lived in Northwest Florida until last week. So that was kind of a surprise for me. But yeah, I'm glad you're still getting after it and trying to help people and do some great stuff, both of you.
I appreciate you,
Yeah.
brother.
Thank you.
All right.
Out.
Out.